Good Monday afternoon to you. 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you had a great weekend. Plenty of Browns to talk about. A little over a week, the NFL world will go to Indianapolis for the scouting combine, free agency, league year, and all that follows leading up to the NFL draft. Plenty of Browns to talk about. Let's take a look at this tweet from Jack Duffin, Orange and Brown Report. Realistic free agents at every position for the Browns to look at. So, quarterback, you got Joshua Dobbs, Madison, running back, Scherfeld, wide receiver, tight ends, Atkins, tackle Fleming, guard Froholt, Levin at center, Okonkwo at edge, Reed defensive tackle, Walker linebacker, cornerback Oliver, and McLeod as a safety. Let's welcome in Jack Duffin from the Orange and Brown Report. Does a great job with salary cap, free agency, and the like. We'll be prepping for the draft after the combine. But, Jack, you look at this. Who are some of the targets in that list that you think make a whole lot of sense for the Browns?
Yeah, so a couple of guys I think make loads of sense. And you'll see from the initial list, they're not the big sexy names. We're not talking about Daron Payne. We're not talking about lots of money. And I think if Browns fans are expecting to be really active on the first 2 days of free agency, they're probably going to end up disappointed. It's more going to be you're filling out the middle of the roster. Let's get loads of guys in on that 3 to 6 million range who can really transform the team and take your pass rush from 1-2 stars to having 5-6 guys that are constantly getting at the quarterback. So Okonkwo is one I'm really interested to see. Wanted him last year. He went into did a 1-year deal with the Texans. And now I think if you can get him timed down at like $5.5 million a year, you're going to get a solid option opposite Myles Garrett.
Yeah, and I think you make a really valid point because it's not the top end of this roster that needs help. When you look at the roster, they have the star power. You've got Ward, you've got Garrett. To a certain extent, you have Emerson. It's the middle of the roster that kind of let you down last year, I think.
Yeah, the majority of free agents that are signed for like 10 million plus are generally cut after 2 years. And that's just because if a guy's a free agent, well, one team's obviously decided they don't want to keep him. Then there's a bidding war, so the price goes up higher than it should be. And then teams are regretting getting that player. And it's not saying they're bad, but they're not worth what they're paid. And then the first question becomes, well, how do you get out of this deal? So it's a free agency, and the teams that use free agency the best, it's that middle of the roster guys, bringing in your second tier, and then padding that out for where draft picks hadn't hit. How do you sort of build the room so you fill your needs in free agency of guys that it's not big splashes, but it's that consistent quality, and then you draft guys that will hopefully be the franchise cornerstones. That's where you get your quarterbacks, your left tackles, your wide receivers, your edge defenders, and your corners. So focus on the draft for your stars, and you build that for the future, but fill those needs in free agency. Nothing too splashy, but you get to the end of the year and you're like, wow, that guy made a real difference, and he cost like $4 million.
So along those lines, this is something, again, that you tweeted. 2022 average player per year spent 10 million plus players per year. Browns lead the league. They've got 213, almost 214 million, significantly more than the Rams and the Eagles, who are 2 and 3. Cardinals are 4, Packers are number 5. Again, what that tells you is they've got the high-level elite guys that are making 10 million. Might even have too many of them making that kind of money.
Yeah, when you put in that much money in the top handful of players, you generally have no second tier on your roster. And that's kind of a problem for the Browns. Well, sort of when Myles Garrett has a breather during a game, well, who's in there creating pass rush when he's not there? And even with Conley, all the money was in 2 guys. So if you spread that money around, you have a more consistent pass rush, you have better protection because injuries happen. You only have to look at the Bills. They were relying all on Von Miller. Von Miller went out, and suddenly their pass rush stops, and their Super Bowl odds just continue to crash throughout the end of the season and the playoffs because people are looking at them and going, these guys can't compete. They don't have the depth of talent. So it's a balancing game, and you've got the Eagles up there high, but they're paying their quarterback $2 million in that year compared to $46 million at Watson. So that's $2 million for every single starter across both sides of the ball that a team like the Eagles can spend on a rookie deal. So the Browns have got a veteran contract, and they need to bring that number down. I'd say around 7 and 8 players is sort of what you'd expect for 10 million plus. Browns were on 12 last year. So middle tier needs building and a little bit of fat off the top.
All right, let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason for the first time in this show.
Hey, love the show. Just have a question for you. So what do you think one surprise move will be this offseason, whether it be adding a coach or cutting a player, re-signing a player to an extension, trading for a player, free agency, draft, just trading picks to move up? Like, what do you think one surprise move that the Browns will do this that you think could happen this offseason? Go Browns. Ooh, ooh, ooh.
As always, appreciate the voicemails. Jack, that's a pretty good question. I'll defer to you. I know you've kind of looked at it and played around with the roster. Some things you think, surprise moves you think could happen.
So the one I'm going to go for is actually with the draft, because I think they fill their needs in free agency. And the draft's all about the future. A lot of people look at the draft and think it's for 2023, but the draft's about like 2024 and potentially the next 8 years. I would keep an eye on left tackle at pick 42. I was saying keep an eye on cornerback last year, and this year I'm saying keep an eye on left tackle, because if they're not sold on Jedrick Wills, the place you go to replace him is in the draft, and that can start as early as pick 42.
Any guy you think could get moved via trade? I don't want to say. I don't think Ward's getting traded. I don't think Myles Garrett's getting traded. I really don't think Nick Chubb's getting traded. Do you think they could trade a veteran guy?
It certainly could happen. If you look at the cornerback room, there's potential for pressure there. Newsom said he'd rather be on the outside, which makes full sense. You can get $20 million a year out there. You can get $5 million a year in the slot. So who wouldn't want to be on the outside? And then, yes, it's nice to have 3 corners that are really good on the outside. But at the same time, you can't have 22 great players. So I want all my great players to be starters. So what they might look to do is sign a slot in free agency and then move on one of their corners. So keep an eye on potentially Newsom, because he's probably got the most value in a trade. And if you can get a solid player, who, whether it's a wide receiver, whether it's something else, it could be an edge, it could be a defensive tackle, that might be a route they go. So Newsom is sort of an unlikely trade candidate because, hey, trades are unusual. But don't be surprised if they go, actually, let's try and get some really good value for him.
All right, before we go to break, 4 realistic cuts that could save the Browns at least $2 million each. This by Dogs by Nature. So they go with Jakeem Grant. It saves them $2.9 million. Joe Haeg, offensive lineman. Haeg played 1 snap last year. Saves him $2 million. Harrison Bryant, $2.7 million, and Jordan Elliott saves him $2.7 million. When you add all those up, $10.3 million is what that would save them. Some of those guys haven't lived up to what they want, but I don't know. You have to have something better to replace them with, I suppose.
Yeah, so it's about sort of weighing up the options and going. I don't think any of these guys get cut really early in the season. Maybe a Jakeem Grant if they're just not sure that his health's going to hold up for camp, because if he gets re-injured, they'll end up paying him some money. So with the other ones, especially Bryant and Elliott, at the moment they're injury cover, and they can look out there, whether it's Jordan Akins of the Texans, whether it's sort of Jerome Reed at sort of $4 million, where they go, actually, rather than just cut this person outright and we've got a hole on the roster, can we find better guys? And then when you get right to the end of camp and you're there cutting down the roster to 53 players, that's where you might go, actually, we're going to get rid of this guy, or we're going to trade this one off, and maybe for a nothing return in the grand scheme of things, but they're probably depth. The only cut I can realistically see this early in the offseason is John Johnson, which they've got to make a $9.75 million decision, and that comes right early in March. I think it's the 17th or 20th of March is when you would expect to see that decision made.
Before we go to break, let me ask you this. Everybody's making a big deal. The Browns are over the cap. I know you've tweeted out some stuff. What would you expect them to do renegotiation-wise, and how much space can they legitimately clear for the salary cap with just a couple of moves?
Yeah, so I'd expect John Johnson to get cut. That would be a post-June 1st cut, which frees up 9.75. I'd expect Deshaun Watson to get restructured, but they'll wait on that. The reason why they'll wait is the Lamar Jackson franchise tag is the average of the top 5 players at the position. So if they wait until the tag is given, then it means Lamar Jackson's tag's going to be higher. So why not cost the Ravens a little bit of money by just delaying that slightly? And then I'd expect Myles Garrett to be the next restructure, and then probably looking at 2 more in Bitonio and Teller, just because they've got longer-term deals. But I always keep the numbers pinned on my Twitter, so if you jump over to @JackDuffin, there's always a nice, easy breakdown there, and it explains what restructures are and sort of how it impacts the future, because it is buying on a credit card, so there is a little bit of future risk, but I'd expect 4, frees up about $60 million. I think they'll roll 2025 of that into 2024, but it's at least some pocket money for Andrew Berry to go spending.
Yeah, he can go find what he needs to get relative to that wide receiver position and offensive or defensive line, rather. Jack Duffin and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Plus, Jack has some ideas on running backs that can replace Kareem Hunt. We'll hear about that. Sports4CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Jack Duffin from the Orange and Brown Report. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave. Frank from Cleveland. Great show as always. Few things to touch base on. Cedric Wills. Come on now. If Coach Callahan can't make him any better, who in the league can? Number 2, the linebackers are always hurt. You know, they're smaller and quicker guys. Taking on offensive linemen because they just mow over our defensive tackles. Number 3, Nick Chubb in the shotgun. Wouldn't that be better for him? And he could see the holes open up if he just gets the handoff from the shotgun. I'm not sure what you think about that. And last thing, Calvin Ridley. I said we should trade for him last year. Jacksonville walks away with Calvin Ridley for a 5th-round pick, I believe. That would have solved a lot of our problems. All right, Dave. Love you, brother. Be good and be safe, as always.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Jack, when you look at that, Cedric Wills is it's a head scratcher. You want to see more from him. He hasn't been horrendous, but he's not anywhere near living up to the 10th pick. So he's being compared to the 10th pick in the draft, and that comparison is not good for Cedric Wills right now.
Yeah, it's one that he's just been like an average left tackle, and it's kind of frustrating because Andrew Thomas, who went, I think it was pick 4, he went in the end, but he went higher, had a really slow start, but has come on so well and had a really, really good year this year with Brian Dable. Whereas everyone else, hey, Mekhi Becton has not been pretty, and who knows what happens with him future in his career. Wirfs has been really good, but as a right tackle, hasn't moved over. So it's a tough spot, and teams pay an awful lot of money just average left tackle play. So I think it's one where you kind of just bite your lip and hold on for the time being. If we had a 1st-round pick again, I think left tackle is certainly on the table, but we don't have that. So it's probably one where you just have to roll with it, probably the next 2 years, give him the 5th-year option, and who knows, in a year's time, you can probably trade him off because the team will still take on a $14 million cap hit. just for a left tackle because they're desperate. So certainly one that I think it's not ideal, but it's okay. And as long as Deshaun Watson's getting the ball out, the machine will continue to roll.
Relative to Calvin Ridley, I think they need more of a twitchy, faster guy. Ridley's a good receiver, hadn't played in a year. You need somebody that threatens the field, both sideline to sideline and vertical. Someone that can turn a short pass into a long gain. Ridley's a good receiver. They just need a different skill set, I think.
Elijah Moore's a name that really, really appeals to me. Fans aren't going to like what I'm about to say. You should give up for Elijah Moore, though. So I think it would be around a third-round pick. But I don't really want to give up picks because we've spoke the roster's really, really expensive. So we don't really have the luxury of giving away picks for players that are partway down their rookie deal. So I'd look to trade off a guy that is very, very unlikely to get extended in Cleveland, and that's JOK. And people will be shocked at first of going, oh, you can't give him up away, he's promising. They're not going to pay massive money to a second contract at a linebacker. It's a low-value position overall. So if you can give him up and you bring in Elijah Moore, you've gone and got a player who does have a future here as a second contract. And I think you're in a much stronger spot there. And how difficult is it to actually replace JOK? And I would say it's not hard. You've got guys like Kaiser White. You've got guys like Denzel Perryman. $4 million a year these guys are going to get in free agency. And you're going to get the same level of play or similar to JOK. So for me, I'm more than happy to give up a guy that is going to cost a lot on the second deal. And if you can replace him for $4 million a year in free agency and get a player like Elijah Moore, it's a no-brainer. So I think it's one of saying, hey, thank you. You've been okay, but we want to go and get more explosive on offense. And the price for that is JOK. And people love the scenarios where you give up nothing in a trade and you get something back. They don't exist, especially at a high-value position like wide receiver. So a nice, easy move there that I think should be a no-brainer. If the Jets are interested in biting and they've invested in before at linebacker, if I'm Andrew Berry, I'm picking up the phone and pitching that offer.
Yeah, I like Moore, and heck, the one that I thought of was even Greg Newsome for Elijah Moore, because then they could pair Newsome with Sauce Gardner. So, and you got a defensive head coach in Robert Saleh with the Jets. So those, I'm with you though. I like Moore a lot. I think he's what they need. This is an article that you wrote as well. 3 running backs who can replace Kareem Hunt. Alexander Mattison, and you have 1 year, $2 million. Latavius Murray, 1 year, $1.5 million. Raheem Mostert, 1 year, $2 million. And again, there's some savings on that as well. Kareem Hunt was making substantially more than that. Yeah,
so this offseason, I've gone through all the unrestricted free agents. We're talking over 630, 640 players and written opinion pieces on all of them. So, and some of them are short opinions of, he's not good, I don't want him. But really gone through and looked at everyone. And there is several options that would be a nice running back. For me, Alexander Mattison would be a no-brainer. Stefanski was with him at Minnesota before. He's been stuck behind Dalvin Cook, so comes as an upside player at a cheaper price. And you can bring him in and you can really see what he can become. I don't think he's going to get a starting gig, which brings that price down and puts it in a nice range for them. And Raheem Mostert's the other one that really intrigues me. Very similar scheme, can come in. And Jerome Ford's played I think off the top of my head, it's 9 snaps as a runner and 14 in preseason. There is not enough evidence there for me to go, I'm happy with him as the backup, because you've got to be ready for Nick Chubb injuries this year. Because when a running back plays so many snaps in one single year, there is the tendency for injuries to happen the following year. We've seen it with Jonathan Taylor. We've seen it in lots of cases. So the chances are Nick Chubb will miss games this year, approaching the dreaded 28 age for running backs when that decline tends to kick in. So need to be ready. So an Alexander Mattison and Raheem Mostert make a lot of sense because you don't want to spend too much money, but you do need to be prepared for games without Nick Chubb.
Yeah, and Mostert gives you some speed and explosiveness as well, and Madison as well. All right, this free agent cheat sheet, some players that Browns fans should keep an eye on. Couple of them here, and I can let you talk us through these. This is, again, from Jack Duffin's Orange and Brown Report. Always good stuff. Also follow him on Twitter. You'll see his Twitter handle. So take us through this and what you think here as far as people to listen out for in free agency.
Yeah, so I dug through all 600 players, and then I thought we need to make this easier because people won't want to read through all the lists, and then nailed it down to a handful of players. So there's sort of the starters. Brendel was the only one. I don't expect them to be that active chasing starters on offense because they've already got loads and there's lots of money invested. A name I really like is Cameron Fleming in the tackle for a sort of swing tackle. It's only going to cost $2.5 million on the market, and I think he'd be a really, really solid piece. In wide receiver terms, Trent Sherfield or T.Y. Hilton or Marquise Goodwin be a really nice third option because realistically for me, my favourite option for pick 42 remains wide receiver. So bringing in a solid veteran like T.Y. Hilton just gives you a nice floor while you've got David Bell, the rookie, Woods potentially to develop and be your future long term. And then luckily for the Browns, there is lots of options at defensive tackle, at edge, and at free safety this year in free agency. So that's really, really promising because the strength of free agency matches what the Browns are looking for. So yeah, any of those sort of names they can go for. Onyemata from the Saints is a really nice defensive tackle, probably around $7.5 million a year. Thornhill's an option people are looking to in safety. I really like Rodney McLeod from the Lions, but he was with Schwartz at the Eagles in the past. So cost about $2 million a year, slightly older, but brings a lot of veteran experience. And Delpit and a younger player, maybe Dominic KZ, who was at the Steelers, the player that Browns tried to get last year, could be that third safety option. Bring in some cheap options, some veteran leadership, and let's really get everything we can out of players like Delpit, and everyone else in that secondary would be able to benefit from having him there.
When you look at the defensive line, how many free agents do you think? Obviously, you need a starter opposite Myles Garrett. You probably need two starters at D tackle. How many do you think they bring in? How many veteran free agents do you think they bring in?
So I'm expecting two at each spot. So two edges and two DTs. I think the only one they probably spend a lot at is one starting DT, which I think will probably be around the $6 to $8 million mark. Another DT at around $3 to $4 million. Edge, probably one at sort of $5 million, and then another one at about $3 million. Some names that really intrigue me is Okoronkwo as the starting edge, about $5.5 million. DeMarcus Walker was with Schwartz at the Texans, the Titans, and played really well. So I would spend the, say, $3 million it takes to bring him in. So I think that's the best way to go. Spread that money out and get that constant pass rush and really get after the opposing quarterback. What we can't do is bring in two studs. If you have Myles Garrett and then you have Jerome Payne, well, that's great. But what happens if one goes down injured or one's off the field getting a breather because they have to rotate? Give me that consistency across the whole line. I don't want to be seeing players like Jordan Elliott, Chase Winovich, Alex Wright as your starting players. Get that depth. You need to be 6 deep across the D-line and happy with that group. And we've not been there in the past.
All right, before we go to break, you make an interesting point in this tweet as well. Brown's age guardrails, we've made a big deal about it. They apply to draft picks only. And the reason for that is because if you're drafting well, you're going to give them a second contract. So these are unrestricted free agents that signed when they were 30-plus in their season of signing, 30-plus years old. Troy Hill, Malik Jackson, Adrian Claiborne, Malcolm Smith, Case Keenum, Andrew Zendejo, Jakeem Grant, Jacoby Brissett. And, Jack, I would say the other thing is the Browns are clearly in win-now mode, so I think that will probably also necessitate, if the guy's a little older, if he can do it this year and next year or this year, you get him in a 1 or 2 year deal because you need to win now.
Yeah, so I think in free agency, there's this conception that the age guardrails apply to everything. And it's just not the case because, as you said, if you bring in a guy in for 1 year, it doesn't matter really if he's 32 or he's 26 because you're not looking to develop and bring that guy on and you haven't got 4 years of control. It's 1 year. It's what can you do for me now? Free agency is all about need, so bring those guys in. And the same with undrafted free agents. That player has got like 2 months to prove they should be on the 53-man roster, or they're getting cut. And so we've seen one over 3 years, and that is Bell, the safety, who's made the final 53. So that's really unlikely. And even AJ Green didn't actually make the 53, because lots of people think he did. He didn't. He was on the practice squad and then got called up later in the season. So it's one that it's really tough. But there's a reason why the age guardrails apply. And people always go, I'll just throw them out. Get me guys now. If you are relying on a draft pick to start, your team's not good. So the idea that you need to draft for need does not make sense. The draft picks are about the future, and that needs to be the backbone of your roster for ideally the next 8 years. So get the guys that are really promising, because if a guy's that good, especially with, it might change over the next few years with Neil and the amount of money that players can earn in college. But if a player's good, they go into the NFL. If a player's hanging around until he's 24 in college, probably not great, and he's beating up on kids that are younger than him in college and sort of less physically able. So there's a reason why those guys are there. So I think the age guardrails will stay strong, but it's something interesting to follow this draft season.
Jack Duffin and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. We'll continue talking Browns here on Sports for CLE with Jack Duffin from the Orange and Brown Report. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Jack Duffin from the Orange and Brown Report. This is from Warren Sharp of Sharp Football. Never before has an NFL player's cap hit exceeded $39 million. That all changes this year. Deshaun Watson, $54,993 million cap hit in 2023 will be the largest for any player in NFL history. Watson will hit the Browns cap for the same every single year through the 2026 season. Jack, is that a big deal?
Sharp, but it's not actually going to be at that number by the time the season comes around. So it's going to get restructured. That number's coming down, and they'll kick the can more long term. So it's just a waiting game. As I said, they're going to wait for Lamar Jackson to get franchise tag first, just to kick it to the Ravens, and then they'll restructure him. So keep an eye out. If we're at that number at the start of the season, I will legitimately be shocked. The deal was always designed to be restructured for the 2023 season.
And we've talked about that, the restructuring. Eventually, it comes back to get you, but you just keep pushing it down until you feel your window is no longer open. And you see that with teams. The Saints went through that when Breeze went away. Am I misstating that, or is it usually what happens? You just keep pushing it down.
Yeah, so I think they'll restructure it this year, and then they need to decide if Deshaun Watson's bad, then they probably won't restructure it again, and they'll look at how do they manage that and potentially move on from him. It won't be AB's problem because he'll probably get sacked if Watson's not good. If he's good, then I expect them to potentially even restructure it next year, and then after that season, they'll probably look to extend him and then continue to push that money out, because what they'd rather do is get as low a cap hit as possible through his career. And then even if it's for 2 years after he retires, they can then balance that off and do what the Saints have done. You bring in a cheaper quarterback like your Jameis Winston, your Andy Dalton, whether you draft someone, and you're almost paying for that quarterback for 2 years after they retire. But if you've won a Super Bowl, who really cares?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. This is also kind of interesting. This is from the Atlantic in Baltimore. It'll be interesting to see if the Browns, Kevin Stefanski potentially looks at Ravens quarterback coach James Urban to fill Petzig's role. he was named the offensive coordinator for the Cardinals over the weekend, as we had reported he would be. Stefanski and Urban, longtime friends. Stefanski has tried to hire Urban before. Ravens didn't let him go. And again, that's Jeff Zrebic, senior staff writer for The Atlantic. I'm all for getting a fresh set of eyes and ideas as relative to how you use Deshaun Watson in Kevin Stefanski's offense. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's tough to know because we don't really have any idea what goes on behind the curtain with positional coaches. We get a rough idea with like OCs and DCs, but that's kind of it. We've seen a trend of Stefanski hires people he knows, he's worked with, has links to. So it makes a lot of sense on the surface. But we need as many smart people around there. For me, I'd be most disappointed if we go back to this dual role of like Alex Van Pelt. He's OC and quarterbacks coach. I want as many people in there working and trying to develop Watson because, quite frankly, the future of the franchise is Deshaun Watson. Everything else is noise. If he's not playing well, it doesn't matter how good Chubb is, it doesn't matter how good Garrett is, Ward is, anyone else, you're not going to be competing for Super Bowls unless Deshaun Watson gives you top 8 quarterback play. So that's the key thing that's what we've got to achieve if we want to win Super Bowls and compete deep into January.
Yeah, and you have to tailor the offense to his skill set without question. If you're paying him $230 million guaranteed dollars, it's his offense. All right, before we let you go, you tweeted this out. 2022 PFF grade, guard rankings rather. Wyatt Teller 16th and Halate Froholt 18th. One is second highest paid guard in NFL history, and the other is on the minimum. So Froholt played pretty well. Teller has a big number. Take us through kind of the thought there.
Yeah, so for 2 years on the bounce, Teller's players dropped at the halfway point. There was an injury this year, but last year there was nothing on the injury report. But first half of the season, weeks 1 to 9, he was second in the league for guard play. And then weeks 10 to 18, he was 27th in the league for guard play per PFF. And that's the point where you're concerned that, is this going to be now a knock-on thing we see? Because the first 2 years of Teller weren't great in the NFL. He was with the Bills. He had one elite season with the Browns. And then we've seen these 2 seasons where it got decline in the second half. And if you're the second highest paid right guard in NFL history, you have to ask, are we getting enough in return? Because it's a low value position. We're not talking about a quarterback, a left tackle, a wide receiver, an edge or a corner. So for me, I want to get out of that deal. And the fact that we've seen the decline means, yes, look to the trade market. If you can get the third, move him on. And then we can just bring in, whether it's Froholt, whether it's somebody else. We've seen Dunn have really good guard play. I trust in Bill Callahan, and part of the benefit of having a coach like Bill Callahan is he can get great value out of cheaper players. There is no point having the most expensive O-line in the NFL because then Bill Callahan's not giving the value add. I'd say the goal for any offensive line is just to be above average. What PFF and all sorts of analytical studies have looked in the past, being the best O-line in the NFL doesn't actually add that much value. All you need to do is be above average. So as long as we can get a top 16 O-line, let's keep the money in the pass game, give as much wide receiver weapons to Deshaun Watson. That's where the future of the team's got to go. So I don't expect to move, but if the offer was on the table, I think Andrew Berry would be silly not to take it. Move on, bring in, whether it's Froholt, whether it's somebody else, you can get good guard play. And then whoever you sign, Bill Callahan's going to make them even better.
Jack Duffin, as always, thanks so much for the time. Great insight. Make sure you check him out, Jack Duffin. Follow him on Twitter. Also, really good stuff, Orange and Brown Report. Thanks so much, Jack. Appreciate it, man.
Have a good week.
All right, Jack Duffin again. Check him out, Orange and Brown Report, and on Twitter. Always really good stuff, especially in free agency, salary cap, and draft stuff. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Straight ahead, Sports4CLE. We'll be right back.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Try C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams, I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports for CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
In my opinion, when it comes to selecting a new quarterback, I think Kevin needs to include Deshaun on this, as finding a coach that fits his style, fits his ability, and can actually help him improve throughout the offseason and throughout training camp and stuff like that. So I think Kevin needs to get Deshaun's input on the hiring of a new quarterbacks coach, or just have Alex Van Pelt go back to quarterbacks coach and have him coach up Deshaun, since he does have experience of coaching up quarterbacks such as Aaron Rodgers, of course. So I think that'll be a good option.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Let's welcome in Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Tim, I had said earlier, I'd like a fresh set of eyes, somebody that can help unlock maybe even some new things with get some new ideas in how to reinvent this offense. That's my only thought.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially, like you said with Deshaun Watson, now getting a chance to be the full-time starter from week one out, in 2023. This offense is going to look different, so why not get, a new set of eyes in there, someone who thinks a little differently than Kevin Stefanski, than Alex Van Pelt, than they do, and then Drew Petzing didn't. Not to say they're bad coaches. I'm just saying you need just like a new voice in there, someone that maybe those guys haven't worked with before, that again have that different viewpoint. Maybe they have a more pass happy type of mentality, that they're more inclined to kind of think that way than the Browns teams of the past 3 years, which has been kind of more run heavy teams. This team ideally should be a pass heavy football team in 2023, and I think getting a guy who's understands that and understands, those finer points, and helping Deshaun kind of rediscover his fundamentals and all those different things, I think that's kind of what you got to look for in a new quarterbacks coach.
I would agree. All right, so this is from Dogs by Nature. 3 extensions the Browns should consider this offseason. Amari Cooper, wide receiver, safety Grant Delpit, and Donovan Peoples-Jones. I think as far as Peoples-Jones and Delpit go, Delpit showed some stuff at the end of last year. I think DPJ had a great year. The question is, how much is he going to want? And what are you going to do relative to the other thing at that position? I might wait on Cooper to extend him, unless I can bring the cap number on him down pretty significantly.
Yeah, and we're also going to have to see what the cap number is, in 24 and 25, when the Amazon money kind of comes in, the YouTube money with the NFL Sunday Ticket, when that comes in, because I can't imagine those cap numbers are, incremental. I would imagine potentially because of the money the NFL's getting out those deals, that the cap could go way up again, excuse me. But Yeah, I think when you look at those three, I think Donovan Peoples-Jones is kind of the one I would prioritize right now. Coming off his best season, his trajectory is upward. He's still not even technically close to his prime. He's a couple of years kind of away from that. So I would look to lock him up. I know receiver's not going to be cheap, but teams got to start paying for some receivers at some point. And Donovan Peoples-Jones has shown he can be a very good number. He could be a good number 2 receiver. Tough to match up with in the red zone. Very fluid. Yeah, get him his money. I think it's time to pay him. Maybe something. I wonder if something is done the offseason, just take care of that before training camp so that it doesn't become a concern or a distraction or anything like that. Grant Delpit, maybe I'm more willing to wait and see a little bit to make sure we kind of get more of a full, as much of a 17-game track record as possible, and then see kind of what he is in Jim Schwartz's defense. I think that's going to be the big thing is, was the defensive scheme really holding everybody back? And, with a veteran defensive coordinator really unlock the Grant Delpit that everybody thought the Browns were getting in 2020. Now, granted, he's closer to that now than he has been at any point of his career. Obviously, being further away from the Achilles injury he had in 2020 certainly helps with that. With Amari Cooper, I think you also have to be careful of the fact that, he's getting up there in age. He's not going to get any younger. There's always the dreaded 30-year-old cliff that we talk about with these receivers and whatever. Cooper's game is not necessarily predicated on those athletic abilities. It's more about creating separation and savviness. So maybe he ages better than some of his contemporaries, like guys that are just pure speed or pure physical predicated receivers, because he's really intelligent of how to, set defensive backs up, and that doesn't age. So you kind of have to be careful with it, but I think if you're going to keep him around and if you can find a good number to do it, I would certainly keep him around, especially if, like we think the Browns are going to potentially add maybe another young receiver in this draft.
Yeah, I would. I'm curious to see how Donovan Peoples-Jones develops with Deshaun Watson at quarterback, and I'm even more curious. I think Grant Delpit is the kind of safety that will thrive in the box with Jim Schwartz, because you got the wide 9, you kind of walk guys up to the line of scrimmage, and I think Delpit can kind of be one of those undersized guys in the run game that's effective. All right, before we go to break, 3 wide receivers that the Browns could sign. This, again, by Dogs by Nature. The first one, Jacoby Myers. Now, Myers, a lot of people don't think New England's going to let him out of there. 6'2", 200 pounds, 26 years old. You see 40, 4'6'3". Another guy, DJ Chark. He signed with the Lions as a free agent, 1-year deal. A little bit bigger, a little bit faster. 4.34, which kind of surprises me. So that gives you that fast twitch guy. Didn't have a whole lot of production, but was banged up. And then Alan Lazard, a guy for the Packers. You see a 4'5" guy, bigger, and again, kind of 100 targets this year because Devontae Adams left. 6 touchdowns, 45 first downs. Didn't really become the guy that the Packers hoped he would kind of take over that role for Devontae Adams. Did okay, but, did not become elite. Any of those guys interest you? I mean, Chark has the skill set that interests me the most. Do any of those names kind of light things up for you?
I'm with you on DJ Chark. He's obviously an athletic specimen as far as a receiver goes, and I think that's something the Browns have kind of missed at the position of receiver. Even looking at his numbers right now, 3 seasons, of his career, he's had a reception of at least 50 yards, including a career long of 73 yards. That's all the way back in 2020. Plenty of production in Jacksonville. He's got a Pro Bowl to his name. The only thing that's going to be a hindrance with him is where are you going to find the room to pay him? Because I think, I've talked about this before, that I'm fascinated with how, the value of the receiver position is evolving. Especially last season, we saw so many guys get massive contracts. You have to imagine DJ Chark could get big money. Maybe it's something the Browns can't afford, especially if you have to consider a Donovan Peoples-Jones extension, especially with the money being paid to Amari Cooper, unless you were willing to move on from him for whatever reason. And that would really be the only way I would consider if I'm the Browns, taking on DJ Chark, unless you were willing to come at a better a better price point. I think that would kind of be really the only hindrance, because talent-wise, it's pretty much what the Browns are missing. They're missing that guy who can take the top off of defense, can make safeties have to play back and respect the pass a little more. But again, comes down to money. You can't pay everybody. And, when the quarterback that, pre-restructures got a salary cap hit of about $54 million, obviously that could certainly come down with a restructure. But at the same time, you have to, like I said, you can't pay everybody. There is a salary cap, so you have to be very judicious with who you give that space to.
Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll talk some defensive free agents. Sports for CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to Go Forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Yeah, I've heard all this talk about Jed Wills and how he's not anything more than average. Have they thought about looking at Isaiah Wynn, who has failed with the Patriots? They want to make him a right tackle when he's a left tackle, and Jed was a right tackle who we're trying to make as a left tackle. Now, I think Isaiah could be brought in while he's still got Mr. Callahan there, and maybe something could come of it. What do you think? Thank you. Bye.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Tim, he makes $10-something million win. By and large, you need to get somebody who you're comfortable with is going to do the job. I don't think they're ready to give up on Jed Wills yet, but look, he's on the clock now. I think you got to stop seeing some of the. He's got to finish plays, I guess, is the way they are putting it.
Yeah, and I know, obviously, that the fact that we still don't really know what kind of player Jedrick Wills is 3 years into his NFL career is a little concerning, because at some point you got to start to get an idea of what kind of player is he going to be. Is he a guy who can make a Pro Bowl, or is he going to be a guy who's just an average guy? Maybe a stopgap offensive tackle in the future. Those are the things you got to figure out with Jed Wills, and I think this year's going to be so important for him to really show show that consistency, show that, he's not that guy who can make one great block and then the next couple of plays just kind of look average or whatever. But, in regards to Isaiah Wynn, I think if you're going to make a move at offensive tackle, you have to know it's a clear upgrade from what you have. And I don't know if that's necessarily a clear upgrade. I mean, the fact that, New England tried to move around a little bit is a little concerning. But even when you look at his PFF numbers, as far as the left tackle goes, 2020 got a grade of 82.6, playing the vast majority of his snaps at left tackle. And then last season, or 2021, 74.9, playing all those left tackle snaps. So he's got ability, no question about it. But, considering, again, talking about all the cap-tied money you have in so many different places, trying to have all these different offensive linemen who are making double-digit $1 million a year doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And, if you're going to look for these alternatives to try and replenish the offensive line depth to get future starters, why not just draft those guys and let them kind of percolate and develop behind the scenes for a year or two and, slowly bring them in and move on from those veterans over time when you have a cap crunch.
All right. 2023 NFL free agency, overlooked veterans that every team must prioritize. Bleacher Report. Safety Von Bell racked up 4 interceptions with 8 passes defended, 2 forced fumbles. Bell's been pretty good run defender as well. Has only missed 7.2% of his tackles for the season that just finished. Defensive tackle, we've heard this name before, Javon Hargrave. There are going to be teams who shy away from him based on his age, 30. It's a lot easier to sell a fan base on investing in a 25-year-old Deron Payne in free agency, but Hargrave could easily be the better player than Payne over the next 2 seasons. Key for the Browns there. Edge rusher Arden Key. Key has earned 1-year contracts each of the last 2 seasons. Responded with a 6.5 sack season in San Francisco in 2021, 4.5 sacks in Jacksonville. Production is especially impressive considering he's only played 35% of the defensive snaps with the 49ers, 41% with Jacksonville. And I think those are the kind of things you're going to see Jim Schwartz do. You're going to see situational guys. This guy does this well. We're going to use him. And I don't think the Browns did that well enough a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have depth off that bench. And, you know, those numbers with Arden Key are very interesting. I would, you know, I like that possibility for depth, you know, as a third guy, because, you know, you look at the numbers he put up at 2021, you know, working opposite of Nick Bosa, working with Nick Bosa, obviously he'll draw a lot of attention. Then you get some sacks in Jacksonville. You know, obviously they don't have as many big name proven guys, but, you know, Josh Allen, Trayvon Walker, solid young, interesting pieces. And Key was solid along with that. You come to Cleveland, you're going to play opposite Myles Garrett. You know, all of a sudden, you know, you're going to have to see a lot more one-on-ones. You're going to see, you know, more opportunities. So multiple guys to, you know, rotate in and out who can, you know, get after a quarterback. I think it'd be huge for this team and really a must if, you know, like we know with Jim Schwartz, you know, he's going to rely on those 4 guys to bring a lot of pressure on the quarterback. When it comes to Javon Hargrave, you know, that I'm going to be fascinated even if he even hits the market. You know, if Philadelphia is going to want to keep him for another couple seasons, I know they're going to have to pay a big bill for Jalen Hurts, you know, because he's got the last year of his rookie contract coming up. Based on what he did this year, his pay is going to go up exponentially heading into the future. So maybe he's a future cap casualty. I don't know, but a 2-year deal would make a lot of sense for Javon Hargrave, especially because, you know, again, you're kind of in that window. And if you can get a guy, that's a smart play is with a guy at 30, you know, don't give him too many years. Don't give him, you know, too much extended term. You want to maximize what you can get out of him. And I think if they can get a defensive tackle like Javon Hargrave, that would really, you know, make a lot of things better in the interior. All of a sudden you bring, you know, credibility to that defensive interior if you get a guy like Hargrave. And Von Bell, I mean, solid veteran. We know how important he's been for the Bengals the past couple seasons. Productive everywhere he's been. I think he could be a really interesting safety piece, you know, especially if they decide to hold on to John Johnson third in this offseason and bring him in as a third safety. There's a lot of interesting good things he can do. And, you know, I'm sure the Browns would love to have that, you know, Super Bowl playing experience, all that playoff experience, and put it on that back end.
Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
This is Charles Boykin in Dayton, Ohio. Eric Bieniemy just got the Washington Commanders offensive coordinator's job. And what I was thinking about is the reason why Eric Bieniemy has never gotten a head coaching job, but he's been on the eye of everybody for getting it, but they said that he never called the plays on the actual game day. But I'm pretty sure he was involved and set up a lot of the plays and during the week, but Andy Reid is the one that actually calls the plays on game day. So how about the Browns with Van Pelt since he works with Kevin Stefanski, why don't they do the same thing that Kansas City does? And that's with Stefanski setting the plays up and Van Pelt actually calling the plays on game day. He did that when Stefanski was in his basement when we beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. So what do you think about that, switching that around? Thank you. Talk to you later.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Tim, I get the question. I don't know that that's a realistic possibility. Kevin Stefanski said he's going to call the plays. We'll see. I think his in-game game management, in-game kind of thing has to improve. That's the only thing I would say.
Yeah, and maybe, being the head coach, maybe stepping back, and letting Van Pelt call the plays would improve on those in-game decisions. But right now, like you said, he's going to be the one calling the plays. I mean, it's his offense. And in some cases, it's actually been pretty successful. We saw, there were plenty of times when he got a lot more of Jacoby Brissett than you were kind of expecting. It's hard to look at the last 6 games and really see, why the offense really struggled as much as it did. I mean, so many factors played into it. Deshaun Watson having to play, come back after almost 2 years of not having taken a snap. You look at the offense, having kind of changed philosophies on the fly and changed the way they do things, as opposed to the way they've been doing things for the first 11 games of the season. You have offensive line reshuffling. You have the injury to Ethan Posick. You have all these things going on that certainly made this offense, less functional at the end of the season than it was in the beginning of the season. I don't know if it's necessarily about who the play caller is. I think it just comes down to, again, got to make good decisions and you got to put your quarterback in the best position to be successful. But at the end of the day, that quarterback's also got to produce for you.
Yeah, and again, it's Kevin Stefanski's call. I mean, he's the one. Ultimately, it stops with him. If it's not successful, it's going to come back to him. So if he feels more comfortable in having, his fate, if you will, with him calling plays, then he should call the plays, because he is ultimately the one that's going to be judged wins and losses. All right, before I let you go, free agent profile. This from Dogs by Nature. Safety Juan Thornhill from Kansas City, 16 games, 1,044 snaps, 71 tackles, 9 passes defended, 4 TFLs, 3 picks, 2 quarterback hits, and a sack. Fit with the Browns. Thornhill's fit with the Browns depends totally on the team's decision with John Johnson III. Jim Schwartz might believe JJ3 is as good as we saw in Los Angeles, and it was the scheme that was the problem here, and he might want to ride with the veteran. If not, Andrew Berry could save cap space, $9.75 million, by dropping John Johnson and then picking up Thornhill to be the back end of that defense. And that's going to be one of the first decisions that we see made, because it would be a post June 1st designation, which will happen, I believe it's in the middle of March.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to be fascinated again, what they do with free safety, because that's kind of that's certainly a need for the Browns that I think is kind of underrated. And I think what I kind of seen the last couple of seasons, it seems like John Johnson and Grant Delpit, they're kind of like, they're redundant in a lot of ways, that a lot of their strengths are very similar, that they can play deep if they need to, but their strengths are playing, downhill, closer to the line of scrimmage, like you were talking about earlier, is, maybe more opportunities for Delpit this year up in the box, up towards the line of scrimmage. And in that case, if you're going to do that and put Grant Delpit in those positions, you need a guy who's going to be really comfortable, being that last line of defense, in the secondary, that center field type safety, if you will. And I think Thornhill certainly has all those, attributes to kind of fill that role. I still even remember, way back in 2019 when he got drafted, he was a favorite on Brown's Twitter. A lot of people liked him, and the talent he had. I mean, he absolutely popped at the combine, tremendous athletic metrics with Juan Thornhill. Maybe didn't get as much, opportunity in Kansas City because of, they had the Honey Badger for a few years, and just trying to continue to add free agent safeties in that group. So maybe Thornhill could be an interesting option, like a less expensive option. than John Johnson is. And I think he can certainly complement what Grant Delpit does a little more. And at the end of the day, you want to have players who can cover up for each other in that secondary. If you got a guy who's good at playing downhill, you want to have a guy who's good at, taking care, cleaning things up deep and making sure that he doesn't get beat deep, and that the defense doesn't have those miscommunications that we saw, just so many times throughout last season, particularly in the loss against the Jets.
Tim Bielik, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Tim.
You got it. Thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
Tim Bielik, check him out, Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.